thank you for that introduction, and I want to thank Stephanie and Rosa and the GSA for having me here. I think it's kind of appropriate to be at chapel in the gym because I'm going to be talking about where sports and life meet. There's this quote that I saw that I really liked. It said, "Don't worry if you're making waves simply by being yourself. The moon does it all the time." Some people say the most important thing in the world is to know yourself. And so today I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and how I learned that being different and going through some dark times is a great way to come to know yourself and how that can drive the decisions for the rest of your life and bring a whole lot of joy. So I grew up on the opposite coast, outside Boston, in a family that was very into sports. It was all about athletics. My father originally came to this country as a hockey player to play college hockey at Brown. He met my mom there, and they had 3 kids. So me and my 2 siblings, we grew up playing every sport you could think of. And being good at sports, that was the way to get attention and love from my dad. If one of us scored a goal in a hockey game, let's say, the whole family would get to have Chinese food for dinner. So that was our reward system. It was very clear. And growing up, all I wanted to be was good at sports. And I loved playing sports. I mean, it was fun, got to make friends, and have activities outside of school. My sister, Lauren, she was a hockey player. She was amazing. She was so good that she played with boys up until high school, at which point she was a star on the U.S. Women's Junior National Ice Hockey team, so I got to see her wear the USA jersey in international competition, which was amazing for a little brother. My older brother, Brian, he played college lacrosse, so there was a lot to live up to in my family. And growing up, I was always in the back of the car, going from hockey game to lacrosse game, from here to there. And I just wanted to be a great athlete myself. I loved sports, but I also liked other things like music and theater. I would write poems and plays growing up, and then I acted in a bunch of plays up until 6th grade. That was the year my father took me aside and he said, "Andrew, you're going into middle school next year, and you have to decide whether you want to be the guy in middle school who plays football or the guy who does plays." It kind of sounded like the decision had already been made for me. And while I was a little bit stunned by what he said, I felt like my dad was protecting me, and I loved him for it. But it was also very obvious to me that my dad was homophobic. Not because he had a deep-seated fear of gay people, but because it was the world that he grew up in. And it was the way that he thought he could stand up for his children. At that time, there was no healthy version of a monogamous gay relationship in the world. There was only images of sickness and disease and death. My dad, who was a doctor, he once told me a story about how a patient came into his office and described how he got injured while kissing his partner. When my dad asked the man to show him a picture of his girlfriend, he said, "No, my boyfriend, I'm gay." At which point my father told the man he would have to leave the office and find a new doctor. My dad doesn't remember telling me that story, and probably doesn't want me sharing it today, but I will never forget hearing that. I have a gay uncle, my mom's brother. He's been with his partner for, now husband, for as long as my parents have been together. And I would see my gay uncles on certain holidays growing up from time to time, but it became clear later on, actually only a few years ago, that my dad had kept them from seeing me and my siblings, even though they lived just across town. In his mind, he was protecting us. But it was clear to me from all of this that being gay was not a good thing. The only problem was I was pretty sure that I was gay. I wasn't about to tell anyone, but I knew the only crushes I'd ever had in my life were on guys. So, at my father's suggestion, or insistence rather, in 7th grade, I went all into the world of sports, joined the football team. So I played football, hockey, and lacrosse, and I loved it. I loved being an athlete. It was great. I remember the first time I scored a touchdown in a football game. It was an end-around reverse, and I went on like a 60-yard touchdown run. And all throughout school that next week, all the cool kids were giving me high fives. And, it was a high. It felt good. And then in the spring came lacrosse. And although I didn't play my first lacrosse game until 7th grade, the first time out there, I was a natural. It was easy to me. And in 9th grade, I tried out for the varsity team and became the first freshman to start on varsity for my high school. I was just this awkward 15-year-old kid walking around the school, and all the cool seniors would stop me and say, "Hey, Goldie," in the hallway, and my freshman friends would say, "Oh my God, how do you know him?" It earned me a lot of cool points. And those were important because inside I was terrified of being found out for who I really was. Every night when I would go home, I would lie awake in bed at night wondering why I was made this way, why I was different. Why did I have crushes on guys and why couldn't I have those feelings for girls? What was I going to do when I grew up? How could I make a family with a woman if I had no desire to be intimate with girls? What if I wanted to be with a guy? Would I have to run away from everyone I knew to have that life? And what about my parents? What if they found out? Would they ever speak to me again? So I would lie there in bed praying that I would wake up in the morning changed. And every morning I would wake up knowing it wasn't going to happen. I thought about suicide, and I even started dropping a few hints to my best friend. He would shut it down as soon as I brought it up. It wasn't that I wanted to end my life. I loved being alive. But it was a desperate call for help, and no one seemed to listen to it at the time. And then in the locker room, I would hear all sorts of homophobic slurs, seemingly on an endless loop. "Dude, stop being a fag. That song's so gay. Let's beat those homos." It's what I would hear. It didn't feel malicious, but it still hurt every time. It seemed pretty clear to me how everyone felt about gay people, which meant that I knew how they'd feel about me if they knew who I really was. So I became completely obsessed with hiding my true nature. Obsessed with making sure I called out the hot girl with the big boobs every time, even though I was the last one actually trying to hook up with her. I do remember, though, this one moment of hope when I was in the lacrosse locker room. It was during my junior year, and a kid a year older than me at a Massachusetts high school, this football player. He was a linebacker, captain of the team, real tough guy. His name was Corey Johnson. And there was an article written about him in a New England sports magazine, and there were a bunch of copies that were left in the middle of the locker room. And so everyone started picking it up and reading, flipping through the magazine as we were waiting before practice. And the main article of this magazine talked about this football player who stood up one day after practice and told his coaches and his teammates that he was gay. And the article talked about how all of them stood up and supported him. Suddenly for me, sitting here with my teammates around me reading this article, the issue of gays in the locker room felt really close, and it was incredibly scary for me. I just imagined that my teammates, as they were reading this, were thinking, who in our locker room is like this? But my teammates who read the article, they said things like, "Oh, that's pretty cool," flipped down the magazine and moved on with their day, almost as if they didn't really care, or at least didn't care to trash the kid for being gay. And then they went right back to saying, "Stop being a fag," and "Oh, that's so gay." It was weird, that the words they used didn't seem related to a hatred of this gay person. But it didn't mean that I was ready to come out. After all, one gay high school football player doesn't mean that it would go well for me. And there weren't any gay college lacrosse players or college football or hockey or baseball or basketball or anything like that at the time. There was still no such thing as a gay athlete at the next level. But there was this little bit of hope that stuck inside of me. I remember one year with my family at Thanksgiving. My whole family was around this big table at my grandparents' house. And for some reason, my sister decided to yell out to the whole family, "Hey, I heard this crazy rumor that Andrew's gay. Can you believe it?" And I have no idea what made her decide to do this, but everyone in the family instantly responded by yelling out things like, "That's ridiculous. Andrew can't be gay. He's such a good athlete." And everyone seemed completely satisfied by that answer. I could not believe what was going on. It was truly one of the worst moments of my life. No one said anything like, "Well, I don't think it's true. But if it was true, that'd be okay." No, nothing like that. It was just simple math to them. An athlete must be straight. Andrew is an athlete, therefore Andrew can't be gay. And it's funny that my dad thought that I had left acting back in the 6th grade because by the time I showed up for my first year of college as a lacrosse recruit, I'd been putting on a show every minute of my public life for at least 6 years. It was exhausting, always making sure to look at the pretty girls as they walked by, making sure I didn't get a double peek at any hot guys. So I got myself a girlfriend my first year of college, and I would strategically make out with her at parties when I knew my teammates were within sight and might see. Just in case they had any doubts about my sexuality, that would ensure my status as straight, at least for a little bit longer. But in college, when you're an athlete, you spend all your time with your teammates. Whether you're going from lifting to strength training to off-field video to practice to meals after the game. So I was always around my teammates. And there was so much homophobia, maybe even more than in high school. You'd hear, "That professor gave us a pop quiz today. What a faggot." Or, "That party at SAE last night was terrible." I know, SGE, right? It was terrible. My sophomore year was the year everything changed. In secret, I met and started dating my first boyfriend.